Okay, I think I see most got a bunch of people who have joined now, so I'll just get started. So hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's such a pleasure to have you all in this virtual Grand Union space with us for the Q&A tonight. My name is Hannah, and I'm just going to do a quick introduction to this event before I hand over to Joe and to Beverley and our brilliant panel for tonight. So tonight really brings together just a few of the people who have, I guess, contributed in sort of myriad of different ways to the making of Beverley Bennett's newest and brilliant film project, Simon Says Dadda, which is a 3-channel installation that's been developed through a series of gatherings that took place across England that I guess really sort of bring to light different stories that are currently not being represented in visual art spaces. And the show is currently on at Grand Union. So I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but if not, the show is on until the 27th of May. So please do come down and see it. We're open Wednesday to Saturday, 12 till 5. And then the show will tour to Metal in Liverpool, Lux in London, and the New Bridge Project in Newcastle later in the year. So tonight we are also joined by Seema, Lima, and Chantal, along with Beverley, and my wonderful colleague Joe will be hosting the conversation. Just a couple of housekeeping things. As this is a webinar format, we really do encourage you to share questions. And the best way to do this is through the Q&A function, which you can see at the bottom of the Zoom, the kind of Zoom screen. And Joe will share these throughout the event. So any thoughts, comments, questions, please pop them in there. If you do have any issues, I will be off screen, but in the background, so you can always message privately as well. So please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to try and sort anything out. And just so you know, this event is being recorded and it will be available with a transcription on a website at a later date. So if you do need to step away at any point, or if you miss anything, it will be available later to watch. There are also automatic Zoom captions available if that's useful, and you can select these again through the captions button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So I will now hand over to Joe. Please enjoy the evening.
Hello and welcome. It's such a funny thing when you're talking to yourself, but you're hoping that there's many other people out there. I just wonder if we can all say hello and who we are for the audience, just so that sort of people familiarise with our face and the sound of our voice. So hello there, I'm Jo Capper. I'm the Collaborative Programme Curator, Director at Grand Union. I'm going to hand over to Beverley.
Oh, hi, I'm Beverley Bennett. Yeah, I'm an artist filmmaker based in the Midlands and London town.
And to Seema.
Hi, I'm Seema Gonzai. I'm a filmmaker and I was the co-producer for Beverley's project.
Thank you. And Em.
Hi, my name's Mavunja Harrison, also known as M. I'm an artist who happens to do a little bit of acting as well. So yeah.
Thank you. And Lima.
Hi, good evening. So my name's Lima Daly and I was the therapist collaborating on the project when we were going from site to site, which I guess will become, all the information will emerge as we go through. Yeah, I was thrilled to be part of it. So look forward to what we're going to be discussing now.
Hello and welcome everybody. It's it really is like sort of wonderful for everyone to come here together. I guess for me, when I started at Grand Union nearly 5 years ago, one of the projects that I was told that I'd be working to support was working with this artist called Beverley Bennett, and I was like, who's Beverley Bennett? And I guess it was quite wonderful. I think it was the week before last that me and Beverley sort of seeing this project come together, seeing the sort of joy, the sadness, the sort of happiness, some of the difficulties, and sort of, I think when we were sat in the office a little over a week ago, and I guess we sort of had a sort of a real in-depth conversation. We was distracting each other. I was doing no work, but I think because the reason was that actually what the work does, what Beverley does, is that it does something really important and significant in the art world right now, in terms of starts to create a conversation around how can culture, how can art making take steps towards healing, and sort of trying to sort of through culture, like, make the experience of living in the world right now a better place. And so probably we're going to be touching, interweaving through many different subjects with the nature of this project. But I guess, like, Beverley, I'm going to start with you, even though you might avoid me to start off with. But I just wanted you to talk through the sort of the starting points for this project, and in, I guess, the early days that you first came to Grand Union, to Kim and to Cheryl, and sort of what was the conversations like then? What was you thinking about?
Oh, yeah, early days. Yeah, so I made a short film called A Mine previously, and that was featuring Black women up and down the UK, talking about what it's like being a Black woman here, and kind of like setting the story straight, as opposed to what can be sometimes shown in the media and the newspapers, like stereotypes and whatnot. And a friend of mine called Gaining Gould had watched it and commented and said, "Oh, are those individuals partnered up?" And I was like, some are, but that kind of sparked a little question in me to think about relationships. And sometimes you're told the relationship that you have with your father dictates future relationships. And at the time, I didn't necessarily have a great one with mine. So I wanted to do this kind of like investigation, this kind of form of research, and see whether extraordinary individuals such as Chantal, who's joined us now, to be part of this journey. And so it kind of started off with a residency that I had with Metal in Liverpool, a time and space residency, which was really great. And we worked together for like a month, and doing this open call with these generous individuals who, didn't know me from Adam, but decided to come on, like I keep saying, this journey. And I wanted to increase this form of research. So a friend of mine, keeps saying people's names, but yeah, you have to, it's like a community, isn't it? So a friend of mine called Lariat Champong was a really big fan of Grand Union. And he said, you should go and talk to them, being as though, it's in your city. I was like, okay. So he did an introduction with Kim and Sean at the time. And I was invited to go along and have a chat with them. And I just literally rocked up and I was like, do you want to take this project on or what? Yeah. So that's pretty much my approach with all of the galleries. Like, I want to do this project. How can you support? I'm going to be working with lots of individuals, but when we're doing these gatherings, I don't want you to be involved. So like giving me the space and trusting me in doing that. So that's how it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's really important that the sort of those spaces that you created, the gatherings, and I just wondered if you can talk a little bit about sort of those spaces in terms of the sort of sensitivities, the challenges, and how you sort of created and built trust.
So yeah, because the subject matter is so sensitive, And sometimes artists can go into different spaces that can be quite vulnerable. This is me being stereotyping now, which isn't very good, but sometimes artists can go into spaces, take what they need and then leave. And I didn't necessarily want to do that. I wanted to bring myself, so sharing my own stories, and by building that kind of trust and that support network within those spaces. So, you know, we had people were paid for their time. So when they were sharing their testimonies, they were paid for that. To have, like, I do a Waitrose shop, be quite bougie and get all these treats in. And we had like little bursaries for travel. You know, Lima will be able to talk more, but we had a therapist there. So if there was any kind of unearthing or things that I might not necessarily be able to support and hold, yeah, basically the long and short of it is to treat people how you want to be treated yourself. So, you know, they're giving up their time and you're learning quite a lot from them. So it had to be that kind of mutual trust and that mutual bond. And yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
And I guess it would be really nice to sort of bring Lima into sort of that conversation, really. And I think, Lima, that was the first time that I met you, and I remember in the kitchen sort of like having bubbling sort of really exciting conversations around what was happening in those spaces and sort of how you was looking after everybody. But I wonder if you could share a little bit about sort of those gatherings and what they were like and how you was working within that space and supporting people.
Yeah, hi Jo. Yeah, it was the first of its kind that I was aware of. And when Beverley first approached me to do it, it was again through mutual connections, although we had met each other in the past. Like, my background is as a psychotherapist and work with children and families. So a lot of my role had been about how to support connections but understanding the therapeutic needs as well. So it was very collaborative in terms of how to set the baselines, because we were working that out as part of the process. So even from that starting point, it was very creative and organic, because we weren't sure exactly what it was going to be. You know, obviously there was the framework, and I guess Beverley had done the treatment kind of side of it, but we were working out, because each group had its own particular needs. Everybody was individual with that, but obviously we were working on the baseline themes. So it's interesting, really, I think, and part of the therapeutic process. So we didn't, one-to-one support was available, but it was more of a group process, because within it, you know, a lot of healing happens through the connections that we make. So it was about how that gets facilitated and supported, and then that would be my role. But what was interesting is, like, Beverley is so good at doing that. I mean, I was kind of moved, Beverley, by how attuned you are, because obviously we didn't know each other that well, but the fact that how she provided that internal structure, and I guess she'd met with the individual participants along the way, so they had that sense of being held before they even got together. So my role in that really was built on that kind of foundation, and because of my own background, but also meeting with women within that setting and hearing them. So the response to what particular needs might be, and maybe highlighting certain aspects of what their dialogue was, because sometimes we're not sure about what exactly is going on till it's vocalized. And sometimes even in the non-vocal aspects, such as what happens in the artistic and therapeutic process, because it wasn't art therapy, but it was therapeutic art or artistic therapy. You know, I haven't yet coined a phrase for what it was, but that sort of might allow us to understand or get that sort of sense of what it was. You know, it's like about how the texture was developed and how the collaboration was made within the process. So I'm like still buzzing about it because it was just so connecting and contactful for individuals to just be in that space and share and help each other, and to understand themselves and each other through common threads and highlighting particular aspects. So it was very informal, and that was a great learning experience as well for myself, is how you do therapy within a more relaxed setting. So it doesn't have to be, right, you've got 55 minutes, you're sitting in a chair talking about all sorts of things. This was really a lot deeper than a lot of sessions that people might have on a one-to-one. And I think the group facilitates that too. But, you know, like Beverley's insight and thoughts in order to start the process and create it in such a, I don't know, it was like so insightful, because had you not done what you did in the way that you did it, Beverley, with your artistry, lots of things wouldn't have emerged in the beautiful way that they did. And I think that was the art of it as well. So that's what I can say at the moment in response to that, Jo.
Thank you. I mean, I think it gives an amazing insight in terms of the depth and the support, and how the structure of those sessions were really well thought out and cared for. And I guess sort of Chantal, if you'd be happy to talk about your experiences in taking part in those sessions, not necessarily having to reveal any of the content, but I guess just, yeah, that experience of the journey through sort of initially being contacted by Beverley and sort of, yeah.
Yes, it sounded like an interesting project. I've had quite a tumultuous relationship with my dad, so I thought it was really going to be interesting to see kind of what comes out of that. But what I really liked about it is like the camaraderie with all the women. You know, we were all very supportive of each other. And Beverley, like you say, you know, she facilitated it really well. It was a very gentle approach. And what I loved about it is you ended up kind of, because you were doing activities and you were eating food and we were talking and playing music, it brought out things that you wouldn't have necessarily, like you said, in a therapy session. It would have been a bit more intense, but actually we got to talk just very sort of openly. And because it was conversational, I think a lot more things did come out. Yeah, it was, yeah, I surprised myself, I think, with some of the things that I sort of realised about my own relationship with my dad. But also, I think listening to other women talking about their relationships, it was kind of inspiring. Yeah, it was quite inspiring. You saw similarities, but you also saw things that, you know, you sort of wish you would have had, which you wouldn't have got in a therapy session also. Yeah, it was lovely. It was really nice.
And I think that sort of like care and support in terms of those sessions and sort of how you was able to sort of share that things that you wouldn't necessarily have shared, like sort of you can feel that confidence in terms of some of the sound within the film, in terms of people recounting their stories. And I guess, Seema, to bring you in to sort of the conversation a little bit in terms of, obviously you'd worked with Beverley before on a project and sort of was aware of, I guess, how Beverley works and sort of the way that she works and interweaves stories. But sort of how did it feel to sort of, yeah, hold a space for sort of these stories and start to begin to translate that into the form of film?
So Beverley and I have worked together on a previous project, so I kind of had an understanding of conceptually how Beverley approaches certain subjects and different themes, and then how she kind of interprets that visually. So it's kind of like looking at soundscapes of people's stories and then thinking about visually how how that can be brought to life. So yeah, so like I think one of the first things that I found striking about this project is that it was a 3-screen installation, and I'm very used to working with one screen, you know, and telling stories through one medium. So doing 3 screens was a little bit new for me. I think at most I've done an installation using 2 screens. So it was a very different approach for me to have 3, and also to have 3 in a gallery situation, in a dark room situation. And so really it's kind of, for me, it was trying to figure out how those 3 screens, what the relationship would be between the 3. And also conceptually, Beverley really wanted to kind of tell the story of a dining room scenario with a family in a dining room. And so we had a real think about what that would look like. We looked at the kind of tone and pacing of the film, tone and pacing of the stories and how they're being told. And then kind of like looking at the kind of, I guess, the juxtaposition between the 3 screens, you know, what's going to appear on what screen, why is it there, how is it going to appear there, what are the colors of each screen, what is the feeling of the whole experience of all 3 screens together. So we kind of went on a journey, kind of looking at the concept first of all, and then kind of started to go through all of those different elements. So yeah, and I think what was really striking for me was really the colors that are on each screen. You know, there's a lot of really earthy brown, nostalgic tones, as well as then we're outdoors in a very green space, which Beverley called the grounding screen, which was very new to me, to think about screens that had these names to it as well. And so that was kind of the approach, and it was a couple of months of kind of a lot of unpicking and Beverley listening to all of the words and then visually interpreting them. So,
and I guess sort of to bring you in and to sort of hear your beautiful voice. I guess as an artist and performer that sort of I just wonder what your sort of creative sort of translation of sort of the dinner scene which Seema sort of introduced, which I think is such a crucial element. I mean, just to bring a bit of focus, there's a particular scene where where sort of Dad is sort of has like quite an intimidating look and like sort of within that moment. But I just wondered what was going on in terms of that performance.
To be perfectly honest, that scene took me back to my own childhood. I'm a child of Nigerian parents. My father was incredibly dictatorial. Courtney, who plays the father, looks like my dad. He's got dark skin, and he came in wearing these kind of Malcolm-esque glasses, which are exactly the glasses that my dad had in the 70s. The configuration around the table was a bit different because my parents sat at opposite ends and myself and my sister sat opposite each other. But that scene, Courtney could have been playing my father. It wasn't triggering in any way, but there was one point where he looked around the table and he looked at me, and it wasn't, the first time we did it in rehearsal, it wasn't an act for me to drop my head. He's an incredible actor, and Courtney's very gentle and very, very sweet when he's being Courtney, but when he assumed that character, he was very intimidating. So, I mean, I'm a singer as well as a very small actress with a very small A. And when I learn songs, I learn lyrics. And once I've learned the lyrics, it enables me to sing that song and put my own story in those lyrics. And that's what I sing to the audience, my interpretation of any song that I sing. And the process was somewhat similar. I reached into myself during rehearsals, and therefore when we were in that amazing space with loads and loads of people moving around, and you heard all the instructions ahead of time, and then this wonderful set that had been created, it wasn't very difficult for me to reach in and channel not only my inner child, that child who sat at a dinner table where dad was really quite a strong force, but also to channel and think about my mother, who was in that situation with my dad in a very unhappy marriage. And I spent a lot of time with my mum as a child, and I was a very observant child, and she didn't talk overly much, but I could always pick up on how she was feeling. And dinner times were always quite fraught in my house. Was my dad going to like the food? Was it going to be up to his standards? Was the table laid properly? So it was really weird walking into a set like that and walking into rehearsals and being asked to portray things which I already had up here and in here. And I don't know much about the process of acting, shall we say, but I said to Beverley afterwards, it wasn't very difficult for me to channel those characters and those emotions because I've actually lived them. And I don't know whether she's psychic when she chose me to do this role. I think there is a little bit of some deep intuition in Beverley that knows who to pick and who's right and what to say and how to reassure and how to support. And she gave us minimal instruction really, and kind of let the characters form as they would. And the result is what you see on the screen. Yeah.
And I think it's how everybody can start to sort of connect to that film that sort of gives it the power in the sense that having the film in our office space, I sort of have to tune myself out of the sort of the narrative, because I'm taken on an emotional journey almost every time I hear it. And Lima, I wonder if you might be able to say something about sort of I guess art containing and holding those stories and what the potential is, and how might it help to move towards a healing space?
Yeah, as I hear you say that, I think that is a really interesting question, and I think that was explored in the process, and I think that it's an ongoing aspect, and so it gave me quite an interesting angle, I suppose, on how to use different medium. And they say, is it life, art imitating life, and vice versa, and it almost like holds a mirror to the situation, to the experiences, because I think as a body worker as well, sometimes and this is perhaps what was emerging, because there becomes a certain accessibility and availability of our internal processes, and it's almost like on a cellular level there starts a certain reaction that then synergizes into our actual experience. And sometimes it's like the synapses, the connections aren't always firing, or they're misfiring, which then can create another internal process. And I'm really fascinated by the idea of that, because I don't think I've spoken about it or thought about it quite in that way until you asked the question, Jo, in the way that you've asked it. But I think that was the great thing about the process as well, that it gave language to our experience, and then that was translated into various art forms, and it created a very holistic, synergistic experience individually and collectively, and one that has become something else outside of each of us as individuals. Because even though I was the therapist, I felt when Beverley and I were discussing what my role was what that would look like, I felt to some extent I had to be a participant within the process, participant observer, like a little bit like the researcher, because I needed to know what people's dialogue was and how to enter into that space and how to do that dialoguing, and how the conversations that were emerging, both the verbalized ones and the unspoken, how we tease those things and aspects out so that people would feel heard even when things hadn't necessarily been verbalized. And again, I don't know what people, like, if you experience that, like Chantal was actually experiencing that, and we had lots of conversations along the way between the actual, because all of it was like important in terms of process. And so I've done, say, in my role as a transactional analyst, it would be, the process. It's like there's certain dialogues, there's certain nuances in what is being discussed or what's happening. So when Beverley said she wanted my role to be holding space, I was like, really? No, but I found it's like that is so important, because we need containment, containers. We are vessels, and it's about how do we be in spaces within that, especially when we're feeling a little bit fragile or vulnerable, or things are emerging that we hadn't really had space before to explore that. So I don't know fully if I've answered the question, but that is my kind of initial response to that in terms of the process.
I think you've helped us to think about it some more. So that's, and I think that some of it's an open question really, as opposed to a resolved answer. I think that sort of it's enabled us to understand that there is a potential, and there's like a couple of things that I want to go to Chantal, but first of all, I think, Beverley, I just want you to say something a bit about sort of this blurring of art and life, because you do it in the film in terms of the dinner scene. You sort of punctuate the film by sort of, you suddenly move into the setup. And I think that that's a very clear example of like where we disrupt the edges, or when experience becomes everyone's experience.
Yeah, the fourth wall break, which is one of my favorite bits within the work. And again, it's something that I've been playing around with in a previous work that I had done with singers that was part of Ian Sargent's show Cut and Mix. So kind of like showing behind the scenes, as it were, as well as seeing that things are constructed. So I used to work at the National Portrait Gallery as a front of house assistant, and I wasn't very good at my job. And I would be here, there and everywhere, not where I was supposed to be. So I would talk to lots of different people in different departments, and I would get to see lots of things back of house. And it was quite a privilege to be able to witness that. So I also wanted to incorporate that within this work and this ongoing form of research within my practice. But as I said, to also show that it was a construction, like, you're seeing this family setup, and understanding that there are actors there, but then when you see them all together just laughing and joking, and seeing one of the actors' mother in there as well, and seeing how many members of the crew that are part of it, it's kind of like a little portrait as well. So these things take a huge community of people to be involved. And if we had a really good budget, I probably would have gotten everyone from the gathering, and that would have been epic. But yeah, I quite like, as you say, these kind of blurring of edges. And so being outside of that moment, and then like a kind of an abrupt stop, going back into that, having known this information in how this has been created, or seeing different sides of people, and then, getting that kind of shock where, okay, we're back here again. And I think, it's kind of like life. You have those amazing moments, and you're laughing and joking, and then before you know it, it's like, okay, this is another chapter, or this is another part of the groove, which is what my friend Naruma always says. It's another groove. Yeah.
I'm loving the fact that you're even more of a disruptor. Every time I sort of like get to know you some more, there's like something else that comes out. I love the idea of that you not doing your job in the National Portrait Gallery. It's hilarious. But Chantal, I mean, I think that's like really interesting to sort of think about. I guess, you know, your sort of contribution isn't acted out, and sort of, you know, that there is the realness and the authenticity of sort of the stories that sort of, and the realizations through the gathering process. And not, I mean, I guess, yeah, how do you feel about that sort of conversation, or those sort of elements of you being out there in a public sort of space? What does that feel like? Is it, yeah?
Yeah, it was quite interesting. I think like the stories came out partly because Lima was there. So although I knew that she was a therapist, she did feel very much part of the group. So I think that really helped, and to know that there was a therapist there in case something did come up that was quite deep, it's kind of made you kind of it made me open up more than I maybe might have done. You know, it sort of like helped me to drop my barriers a little bit. But yeah, it was really interesting seeing the film of the dinner scene, and like just hearing about like it representing somebody's dad in a completely different way to the way it kind of represented my family. My dad worked away quite a lot, so there was an awkwardness when he was around, and it's sort of like he was kind of like in control, but like it was more that his presence was a little bit uncomfortable because he wasn't always there, and so it kind of represented that as well. So I think that film was really worked really well, because I think it represented a lot of people's experiences in different ways. Yeah, it was how can I say, I think it made me realize things just through the conversations. I think the conversations that you bounce off each other, and so like it sort of it reminds you of different memories, and then we had music and food, and I think that, you know, that all the women getting together, eating food, listening to music, felt kind of like a family. And I think I don't know if it's sort of true for a lot of people, but, you know, for me, it's the women in the family that kind of held everything together, and I think that helped as well, talking about the men in the family, but as a group of women, you know what I mean? I think it really, really helps. Yeah.
And I think, yeah, you're right in terms of the point that it's often the matriarchal, the mother, that, and particularly in art. And I guess, Beverley, if you can just sort of talk a little bit about you know, the idea of using fatherhood and exploring that a little bit. And then we'll go to the audience. So if anybody has a question, sort of like, they could start to sort of put it into the Q&A and chat, but yeah, while they're thinking about that, if you could just say something about that, Beverley, would be great.
I guess, yeah, quite a lot of my work looks at archive, like the personal archive, and then it kind of like evolves out into the collective archive or the community archive. And I don't know, it's quite funny when people highlight things. I didn't necessarily think that this kind of work or looking at fathers would be particularly special. It's just that I had an itch or a query that I really wanted to, you know, unpick, but I also wanted to unpick it with a community of women by giving them space and agency to share, and not just that, but for me to also learn from them. Like, you know, we've got this 3-screen installation, which I class as community, but I'm going to be making a work that's a single channel. Seema knows this, and she was talking to me about it today. to my own personal voice, as it were. And by doing this work has kind of given me the strength to, try and share more about how I feel about my own father, and what things resonate in relation to this body of work. But it's all about our personal histories, isn't it? Well, that's me in terms of my practice. It always comes in and out. But wanting to create an archive that features my dad, because my family is so heavily featured in my work, but I've never really documented my father. And I guess maybe some of the roots of why I do these kind of things is because I want to do it before it's too late. So to have this piece, although it would be really lovely if I were able to document my mum. So that was quite hard when we were filming. That would have been lots and lots of fun. Yeah, she would have chatted to everyone. But yeah.
Oh, that's like touched me a little bit. But thank you for sharing that, because that's I guess in some ways a difficult question, and I know that in terms of like some of the things that you're thinking forwards is to explore sort of your own self within relation to some of those deeper sort of questioning in terms of those relationships. And I know that you'll take care of yourself in the same way that you've looked after others. And if not, there's, you've created a beautiful community of people who sort of have really invested in this. But I just wonder if anybody has got any questions to ask of each other, like as we're all here. I think it might be really nice to sort of, see if there's anything there. If not, I've got like loads of questions, but I don't want to turn it into the me show.
I guess I would like to know, Beverley, like the responses, did you have any sort of idea of what responses you were going to get? Was it surprising? Did you have an idea of what you were going to do with everything, or did it kind of just evolve as it went along?
The responses to the work. Do you mean the work as in the exhibition, or
initially to the women, the stories that came out from the women, but then also the exhibition.
Yeah, it's always a surprise when people are like, I'm up for doing this work with you. It's always like, oh well, this is incredible. So that's always a delight. And to also be quite inquisitive and then form this kind of like relationship with others is, I have to just say that the individuals like yourself who shared their story and their testimony, you all a special place in my heart, because it just means such a great deal. And really appreciate it. But I always knew that I was going to make a setting in a dining room with family members. Initially I wanted it to feature like my siblings who are closest to me in age, to be those two characters, and reimagine what my parents might have been like when they were sitting together. It could have been, great, or it might not. And it evolved into that. And so when working with Em and Courtney and Ty and T, I shared the testimonies actually. So I was playing the testimonies to them, and we were thinking about what could be happening. And I have to just say a shout out to Courtney and Ty if they're here. And even if they're not, when listening to them, both of them said that they have to just say how incredibly strong that these women are who were sharing their stories, and non-binary people. Like, they were just so touched. So for that to come from men, it meant a great deal. But I always had something in the back of my mind, and poor Seema had to help and make that a reality. I don't think Seema wants to work with me again. So hopefully that answers.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of, I guess it is that translation. I mean, Seema, I know that sort of you've also made a film about your father, like back in 21. I just didn't know if you wanted to say a bit about sort of the relationship of I guess, capturing fatherhood, and sort of, was there any remnants of this when you were working with Beverley, or did you see it as a sort of completely new subject? You're on, yeah.
Yeah, I did make a film about my father, and looking at his history and heritage of craft and textiles from India, and I'm from up north, and he worked in the textile industry up north in the mills. So yeah, we made a film. I think when Beverley came to me with this project, I instantly knew why she was making it. So she just gave me the concept. She gave me all how she wanted to do it as well. And that bit, I was a bit like, oh, I don't know that bit just yet. But as soon as she told me that she wants to make this film about kind of father-daughter relationships, it resonated with me. And so I think for me, like the skills of how to film, be around actors or be around your own father and film them, that they started to kind of kick in when we did do the filming with Beverley and her father in the allotment. And so yeah, it's just making sure that everybody feels at ease, and just keeping the relationship building throughout all of the filming as well. So I mean, when I filmed my father, I was behind the camera, and thankfully I wasn't doing the directing and somebody else was, but it was still a very, very unusual situation and a very unusual thing to do, to be with a family member and film them for, to make a piece of art. So so yes, I think it just making sure that, like with Beverley, that the support was there to to make sure that everything went with ease. And then kind of translating the women's, all of the testimonies visually as well with the actors, yeah, it's just having a duty of care with every element of it, really. And so when I was also choosing when we were choosing all of the crew to be a part of this, it was really important that every crew member would also approach the subject matter in the same way. And I think we really achieved that with everybody who was on board. So yeah, so every element of making the film, including the people, including the aesthetics, was also so crucial to it. And and so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think.
And Beverley, by the way, I will work with you again.
Like, how could anybody not want to work with Beverley?
I was just wondering, Beverley, how your dad was with being filmed. Was he happy to be filmed? Was he awkward? How did he feel?
Yeah, duty of care seems very good. Yeah, I think he was okay. He thought it was only going to be about maybe about a couple of hours, and then it was an entire day, and he got annoyed quite a bit. But then there were some really lovely moments. We had a photographer called Kate Green who captured some really nice moments where me and my dad are just like laughing and joking all the time. But yeah, I don't think he'd want to do it again. Yeah, yeah. But
has your dad seen the film?
I'm trying to get him to watch it, but like how some men can be, it's like, yeah, I'll see it at a later date, but I'm going to drag him and see what he thinks. But he likes the photograph, so we're halfway there. Yeah.
Thank you.
We've had a question come through, which I think, well, anybody could answer it, but I'm guessing it's well, I'll just read it out. What advice would you give to a young and only just beginning artist who feels a little bit lost with where to start and how their work can be physically held in spaces? Go on.
How young do we know?
We don't know. We're going to guess 20.
If we're talking about acting specifically, if I was advising somebody that was like my daughter's age, so she's about 18, I would say the thing is to feel the fear and do it anyway. There are loads and loads of drama groups, both kind of like small organizations and massive places like the Rep and everything in between. And I think the trick is to, especially in this day and age where there seems to be a lot of acting happening on social media. Everybody is recording 30-second shots of themselves and putting those things out there. And it can feel, I think, quite intimidating, even more so than it would have done 20 years ago. But I would say step out into that field, go to different organizations, see which one feels like, for want of a better phrase, home, where you feel that you can fit in, because they're not all the same. There are several people I know who run dramatic organizations and they do them for different reasons. But if you dip your toe in the water first and see how it feels, it's always a good idea to get an agent. Also, the practical things, agents, headshots, show reels, etc., etc. And if you go to a good agent, they'll actually help you to do that and recommend professionals that can produce those things for you properly. But I think the main thing is if it's something that's bubbling inside, allow it to bubble up and then allow it to bubble out and go and do something with it. You never know where it may take you. Yeah, that would be my advice. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Anne. Bubbling up and bubbling out, it's sensitive, but also sort of, you know, there is an energy that's behind that. And I guess that's, yeah, the important thing is to recognize your own energy and allow that to come out in a true sort of place. Beverley, what about you? What's your sort of like, yeah, point of sort of advice here for the young and aspiring?
Yeah, just to follow M, really, to just go for it. And if you think that it doesn't fit into a particular area, just do it anyway, because, you know, everyone has a story to tell. It's just about connecting with the right people who can listen to it, really. So just go for it.
Like we've got 2 minutes left, and I guess sort of the chat has been quite light and I guess, but just to be sensitive of the fact that somebody might have found this sort of might have triggered something or sort of brought something up. And so Lima, we haven't rehearsed this, but like what could we all do right now after this to sort of ground ourselves and make ourselves feel sort of relaxed back into our evening? What would your advice be?
I'm a great believer in breathing. You know, sometimes when things are going on, like our first, or if we're caught on by something, our first reaction is to gasp and hold the breath. And actually, if we just get into a space of taking a few gentle breaths in and out, connecting with ourselves, sitting in a chair, feeling that connection, walking out, going for a walk. But one of the best things, if it's not raining and cold where you are, is to just put your feet on the ground, like literal electronic grounding, like walking on grass barefoot is like one of the best tonics. So get outdoors, breathe, connect, drink water and connect with, because the connection thing is so important. So we drink our water and we connect with ourselves internally, like what's going on, what is it about, how you're feeling. Sometimes writing that down is really good, and connecting with other people to just say, I've had this experience, I'm not really sure what to make of it. But the talking out to express, it comes back to the Ubuntu, I am because we are. And in the knowing of ourselves, we can share ourselves with each other and become more defined and refined in who we are. And I just feel that that makes all the difference. And that's what Simon Says Dadda actually supported and promoted. And I'm like, when I think of it, like my heart is like really happy in the process. And then seeing you know, the actual installation a few weeks ago was an interesting culmination from that first conversation, which I think was about 4 years ago. And I was looking at some notes, and I think it was the 7th of May. And it's nearly exactly, you know, so it's the whole thing about becoming in the process of, and then what that becoming is. And it's that transformation, isn't it, that comes out of relationship and those early relationships, and then what we decide to do about it, how we overcome, how we challenge, how we better understand ourselves in that process, and how we connect with each other in shared experiences and dissimilar experiences. And everyone looks fabulous, and it's good to see you, Chantal. I almost didn't recognise you. Yes, wonderful artistry, I think, across the board is, and get your own sense of creativity, because we may not all be artists in being able to create forms, but we've got our own way of expressions that makes us that.
Thank you so much, Lima. And sorry to spring you on that
That's
on you.
okay.
I
I
knew
think I
that
could
you'd
carry
be
on
able to say
talking, but I'm not
something.
going to.
Beverley, like I feel like you should have the last word, and sort of now you're going to go blank on me, aren't you?
I don't even know what to say, but no, just thank you for coming out first and foremost and having listened. And yeah, it was really important for me to share elements of the process, and for it not to just be, you know, kind of artist talk where it's just the name, but it's so many people, and yeah, there's stories that I might not be aware of. So it's also, I'm quite privileged to just be part of the conversation. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, likewise. It's been so lovely for you all to join this evening and sort of be connected and share sort of some more of that love that sort of Beverley's brought through this project. So yeah, like thank you very much everybody for coming, and I hope you, if you haven't seen the show, that you get to see it very soon. And yeah, have a great evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Later. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, well, we stay on, don't we?
You guys stay on. I have to go to a rehearsal, so I'm
Right.
outside. Mwah. Bless you guys.
That's acting with a big A.
Yes, well.
Yes, yes.